This episode is brought to you by my good friends at Zaka Life. Zaka Life is a very unique, organic, full-spectrum hemp company that offers exclusive, cannabinoid-rich hemp products. Zaka does not white label, which means that all of their products are formulated in-house and within the Zaka Life team to ensure that they are providing the very highest quality products in the market. We're all starting to hear about the benefits of CBD oil, but really, CBD isolate is actually not the best therapeutic index for the human body. You see, Zaka Life's full-spectrum hemp extract offers the original cannabinoids, terpenes, and flavonoids, allowing you to benefit from the full entourage effect that Mother Nature intended. I interviewed Zaka Life's founder, Cole Stegman, back on episode 38. You guys got to check that episode out to hear their full story and the passion and quality that the company is all about. But you can check them out at zakalife.com, and if you use promo code MASTERMIND10 at checkout, you'll get 10% off your purchase. Check them out, guys. They've got some great products. I've used them, and I think you will enjoy them too. In about a month or so, I'm going to be sharing a video workshop about the most important things you can do right now to start laying the foundation for your future success. These are based on the lessons I've learned from my mentors, podcast guests, and entrepreneurs that I've studied. It's going to be completely free, but it's only going to be available for a limited amount of time. So to stay in the loop and to get access when it's up, make sure you are a subscriber to my email newsletter. And as bonus, you'll receive my monthly update, Millennial Monthly, as well as any of the other insightful resources that I'm sharing throughout the month. So to subscribe, just head over to millennialmm.com/join, and we'll see you there.
It's never about this 100% happiness or this utopian dream about where I could be. It's all about the journey. That's all it ever has been about, is just about the journey and how each piece that you're getting and each little nugget of wisdom or each little different self-development practice that you're putting into place is inching you towards that.
Hello, folks, and welcome. Today, I have the distinct pleasure of being joined by the host of the podcast, Catching Z's, the Millennial's Guide to Mindfulness. That's right. We have got the Zen master himself back on the podcast, Mr. Nick Zolfo. Welcome, my friend.
Always a pleasure, Brad. Always love our conversations and happy to come on the podcast as well.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to catching up and recording it this time because we've talked quite a bit since our last podcast, which I was looking at was 2 years ago, basically, that we posted that, which is crazy. Back when we were overlooking the Lake Michigan and Chicago and your high rise. That was good times.
Seems like forever ago, that's for sure.
It does. And I also feel like my experience with meditation and mindfulness and really even just spirituality in general has undergone some significant changes since then. And I'm sure with your podcast now, you're 100 episodes deep, that talking to these different mindfulness and meditation experts, I imagine that your understanding of the topic has evolved and changed as well. So I guess that'd be a great place to start is, since you've started the podcast, has your perception of that space changed at all?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's funny because it's some of the things that you might feel or maybe even understand intellectually don't necessarily present themselves in your lives to actually feel them, experientially. And so I think that's really one of the biggest things that I've seen as far as I can kind of understand, bringing your the mind back to the breath and how that can help facilitate these other really meaningful things. But it's helped to have people who have experienced this and they have really keen ways of speaking about these topics that really kind of humanizes them and allows me to digest that sort of material in a much better way. And so I feel like, as you probably know, each guest, you kind of come into the conversation trying to like understand what you think will be covered, and then you end up covering a cornucopia of wonderful additional things outside of that. And I've just felt super fortunate to be able to share the space with some of these people, rather all of them, because I think, no matter how much, they're famous online or just in their community, each person has really brought a unique perspective and has added something to my life that I really feel like I've been able to like put into play from each different guest. And so it's just been crazy to have essentially like, somewhere north of 80 teachers, like everybody's like ask me who my guru is and like who my teacher is. And I'm like, I have one every week, like I have,
right.
have the fortunate capabilities of having, all these people influence my practice. And it's been, I would say really just exponential growth from that.
So what has changed specifically like within your practice, or maybe you can walk us through what that currently looks like and how that's potentially evolved over the years?
Yeah. And I think like, one of the keys that I always talk about to people who are either looking at meditation or feel like they're insufficiently meditating is just about the consistency. And so that's the biggest thing for me. The biggest thing that I can, find and kind of anchor myself around is the consistency of my practice. And so it's just I can definitely tell when I haven't been meditating, and it's really, I don't miss like, certainly not a brag by any means. It's more just like I need this sort of self-care. But I don't miss like, I can't tell you the last time I've missed 3 days in a row. I've certainly missed, and they're probably Saturday and Sunday. But I've been really diligent about that and making sure that I'm getting a consistent practice. And I think the thing that like really evolves for me is each time you're meditating, or if you're practicing mindfulness or what have you, you're kind of taking a microscope to your mind. And so whatever statistic you subscribe to, whether that's, I heard a crazy one that we have like 11 million different like thought processes going on each second. And like, I've also heard the one about like 50 to 60,000 thoughts a day. No matter which one you subscribe to, those are both astronomical numbers as far as I'm concerned. But I think the key thing about having the consistent practice is you start to understand these patterns of your mind, and you start to understand that like the patterns that are definitely not shaping who you are and are just like crazy thoughts. And we all have those, and I continue to have them. But you're able to kind of give that separation. And then you're also understanding the patterns that are like shaping your decisions and shaping the way that you're acting out and doing things in the world, and like how you're influencing other people. And so it's really just something of like getting a deeper understanding of yourself and understanding these nuances about you. Like, I'm very aware of like how judgmental I am in certain situations about like someone just says something and I immediately have this weird thought, but I'm kind of like aware of that, and I'm not necessarily acting on it. Or like biases, that's a huge thing of just understanding like what our unconscious biases are and kind of bringing them to the conscious level. So I would say it's just something that continues to be really like a self-guided experience, just getting a better understanding of ourselves. And like, I think that's the key component of this whole thing is just like, we think, I think back to like high school or like even the college years where you're like trying to figure out your identity, and what we think that identity is like what clothes we wear or what music we listen to, or like, other extraneous things. But I think the key to it is understanding the mind, and so getting somewhat of a map of your mind has really helped me to then understand where I can double down on certain things that I really want to be influential in, and where I can maybe, start to make some changes on like how I'm approaching conversations with certain people, or how, I'm influencing my relationship with my wife, or even down to like, Wiley, my one-year-old, and like how just different things are influencing. So that's definitely how the clarity I think that I've received from the consistent practice and how it continues to evolve today.
Yeah, I appreciate you outlining that. And I think that you're exactly right. It's that awareness that starts to come into your life of of the thoughts that are going on in your head. I'm not sure if you've ever read any Eckhart Tolle, but he talks about it as almost calling it the watcher of your own mind, where you're actually stepping back and you have all these crazy thoughts throughout the day, like you were talking about, however many hundreds of thousands or millions they might be. But once you start to be able to hone in on those thoughts, not identifying with those and realizing, okay, the things that come, those random things that pop into my head, that's not who I am necessarily. Those are just thoughts that I'm having, and you can disassociate with some of those, and you can pull out the ones that you really want to latch onto and go deeper into that. And meditation is just such a powerful tool to hone that awareness, because I know for me, I never even gave it a second thought, even probably as recent as 2 or 3 years ago, that the thoughts in my head are not who I am. Those are just things that are surfacing based on my interpretation of different events, based on my experience, based on the things I've been exposed to. But I can choose which of those thoughts that I really want to associate with, and which of those thoughts that I want to recognize and say, and not judge, and just say, okay, that's a weird thing that just popped into my head, but that's not me. I'm not gonna go down that path. And kind of what you were talking about too, with the judgment and being in these different situations. Like I try very hard not to judge people and to be very open to everybody's life experience and their opinions, and just being able to have good conversations about that and see, okay, maybe I don't agree with that, but let me understand where you're coming from. But before I started doing some of this inner work, I was terrible at that, of not judging a person or a situation or a thing. So I really vibe with that.
Yeah, and I definitely, just to kind of add on that, I think it's, the stuff that we're talking about, although I don't want to make it seem like we're talking about it with ease, because it's not that. It's not.
You're right. No.
As we're talking about, and I think, just to. It takes a lot of work, and it takes some very consistent, again, going back to that consistency thing, just to even come to the awareness level, and there's definitely still some things that, like, I have in the awareness level that I know I can't influence them right now. I'm aware that those are parts of, like, what makes up my mind and what makes up who I am. But it takes a while then to be able to make those changes. And so it's kind of like, the path towards getting there is like, start the meditating and even if, like, meditation doesn't even have to be what you're doing. I think in this hyper high tech world, that we're in right now, like, even if you're just sitting for 10 minutes, not doing anything consistently, that will provide benefits, and then some things will come up, and there'll be some common themes that'll come up, and, it's not always consistent either, like, it could be something comes up one day a month and that doesn't come up again for another year or so. So it's just kind of that consistent practice to be able to then kind of understand on a deeper level, what's going on in your mind. And some of the things might not be stuff that you can, like, bring to the surface or make a change with, but it's definitely that consistency that will be the key in the end.
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying, and I think it's just, the way I interpret it is, it's just noticing some of these thoughts that you might be having, and just not reacting to them, but just, oh, okay, there's something. Like, if you're doing that practice you mentioned of just sitting there for 10 minutes, just notice what you're thinking about. Your mind will wander. That's what happens. That's how us as humans are built, and just noticing that that's happening. And sometimes you might go 9 minutes of your mind going crazy and you not actually thinking about it at all or noticing anything. Your mind's just rapid firing, and you go, oh, wait, I'm having thoughts. Let's take a look at that. So no, that's pretty interesting. Go ahead. Were you going to say something else on
No,
that?
I was just going to say it's always funny because like I always hesitate to say this to people, but I just kind of try to bring that the sort of human level to it. Is like I have times where my entire meditation is just thoughts. There's no like actual anything of like recognizing the breath, you know, and I'm hesitant because like I think people might be discouraged by that, but I'm also, you know, trying to bring it to that human level of like, to me that's okay, you know, and to me that's a meditation, and that is a meditation. And people I think might be discouraged of thinking that like what they're doing needs to be, they need to feel some sort of outcome, or they need to feel some sort of euphoria, and that's not always going to be the case, and in some cases can almost be detrimental if you're chasing that like meditation high, you know, of like the present moment. And what it ends up being is you're just accepting whatever is coming about, you know, and that's, if you can have that attitude towards a lot of the different things that come about in life, it'll serve you very well.
Yeah, that's something I've struggled with historically and still do oftentimes, is in pretty much anything else I'm doing, I'm looking at my time and saying, okay, is that a productive use of time? Or was I successful in that time? Like, for example, if I'm going to work out, okay, was I at the gym getting the exercise in? Did it feel like I had, pushed myself? If I'm at work, I can look, it's very tangible. Here was my to-do list. Here are the things I checked off, and I got some stuff done today, or I didn't. And then I'm like, crap, that was not a great use of my time. Even relaxing or hanging out with my wife or my dog, whatever, I can say, okay, sure, we just watched TV for the last 3 hours, but I did that. I recognize that as a intentional choice to sit down, hang out, watch TV, and enjoy that time. But sometimes, and like for me, a lot of times my schedule will be crazy, and where I find time to get my meditation in is before work in my car. I just actually posted a hilarious photo of this on my Instagram of me pretending to meditate, because I can't actually meditate and take a selfie. But I'll be driving in, and there's so many times where I'm like, I know I have so many things waiting for me that I need to knock out, but can I spare those 10 minutes to get a meditation? And then what it always comes back to for me is like, okay, I'm going to make that time back. And in terms of the extra productivity or just the relaxation and the lack of stress that I walk into, and just walk into the day with a better mindset. But at the same time, you can't always measure you can't measure that stuff oftentimes. And so that has been a frequent struggle of mine. I don't know if that's anything you've come across in your studies of this topic.
Yeah, I mean, I think just it's really has to be something that like you were saying, is something that ends up being felt, and I think it's one of those things where it's funny because probably 2 months ago I was having, for a solid month, all of my meditations were terrible. They were all just and again, there's no scale, there's no bar, but I literally was just thinking the entire time, just all thoughts, no awareness of breath, no nothing. I was thinking about, past, future, whatever wanted to come in. It was an open door. It was a party. All the thoughts were joining, but the interesting thing that I found was that once I was done meditating, everything outside of that 10 minutes that I was doing was being very much impacted by my meditation practice. And so it was almost like a way of sorting things out, and recognizing those things. And then my subconscious, because I wasn't really aware of it until I was like, holy crap, things are different right now. I'm conducting myself differently, and I could definitely tell with interactions with other people. And so it was interesting to observe that, because by all stretch of the imagination, you go 1 to 10 scale of how good was that meditation. They were all ones for a solid month, but then it's what was your life like outside of that, and it was all tens, and it was just really interesting, and just kind of to reinforce that point about the stuff that you're doing during that, let's call it 5-10 minutes, however much you try to do, is only that concentrated amount of time for that specific thing. But then there's 23 hours and 50 minutes of the day that are also there, and so that's really where I think you should be looking for, or maybe trying to focus on how can you bring it outside of that, and so that it's something that is in your actual world. And like for me, it just kind of happened subconsciously, and like it was just things that I think like I was ruminating on during meditation, and I kind of didn't realize that I was like sorting things out in some sense. But really was just then after, when I get out of the meditation, it's like my brain had an understanding of how to facilitate life in a more meaningful way, and just through that, like, that rumination really essentially that whole time. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that happens, but I think like, if you're maybe looking just towards that, the meditation itself for the results, like start looking at other things outside of that. Like how are other things being facilitated? And again, it's something that's, somewhat difficult because it's not like, hey, look at, your relationship with your boss. Is that getting better? Okay, no. Look, it's not like a checklist that you can have. It's kind of sometimes even more subtle things that you can, look at to understand the impact that your practice is having.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I've never thought about it this way, but I always like to relate things back to fitness because that's just a space that I feel like I know, but also people can relate to that because the results are often more tangible than because you see the changes or you feel the changes much more directly. But it's like if you get a good cardio session in, or you go on a run or something, the benefits of that are not just during that time that you're running, but your body's burning calories for the next 48 hours. And that's why if you have a big workout on one day, the next day you might be hungry as hell all day because your body is still firing off and burning those calories. And it's much of the same. I've never put it into those terms or thought of it this way until you outline it like that. But that's a really interesting topic. And you're right. Some of those changes could be so subtle that you don't even necessarily notice them at first, but then you're doing this consistently. And then 3-6 months later, a year later, you'll look at your life and you're like, wow, there's been some big improvements here. That's bizarre. I wonder what, and it's hard to put your finger on what the exact cause of that was, but it could just be this rewiring that you're doing subtly each day with those 10, 20 minutes. So that's pretty interesting. For anybody who's tried meditation, I think a lot of the folks who are listening to this show may already have a great meditation or mindfulness practice in place. So that's great. And hopefully this conversation reinforces that. But there also might be a lot of folks out there who have tried it, maybe even had a really good experience with it. They've heard about the benefits let's be honest. If you listen to this podcast, you probably listen to other personal development type podcasts, or maybe they even listen to your show, and they definitely will after this, hopefully. But they've had that experience and they've seen, they've walked away from it and they're like, wow, yeah, that was nice. But they've never gotten into that consistent practice. And like you said, that's where the magic happens. Oh, and there goes my co-host, Jax, my dog. But do you have any advice for those folks who may have tried meditation, had a good experience, but haven't been able to stick with it consistently?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, a couple of things come to mind, but first is kind of the concept of like the minimum viable dose. And so I put that as far as like, because sometimes like there's a lot of preconceived notions about what meditation needs to be, how long it needs to be, like we have to be going on retreats to have any sort of meaningful impact in our lives. And what the science will show, what Richie Davidson at the Center for Healthy Minds says is it's 9 minutes a day to have the actual changes in your brain occur. But what's 9 minutes if you're doing it once a month, and so I always encourage doing it for the lowest amount of time that you'll be able to do it every single day. And so, thinking about what does your life look like? What does your lifestyle look like? Because sometimes people are like, even 10 minutes seems daunting. Like, I don't have 10 minutes, like, where am I going to find those 10 minutes? And like, I'll do it before I go to bed, and that's Twitter time, or, Netflix time, or whatever may occupy your time. But I think because people too often will also discourage themselves, like, if you have to do 10 minutes a day, that's 70 minutes a week. Like, where am I going to find that time? So I always say, just find the minimum amount of time that you will do every single day. And if that's a minute, if that's 30 seconds, that doesn't matter. Just finding that sort of minimum dose where it keeps you coming back. And so it's something that you can build into a practice. And then also on top of that is really in the core of kind of, what I'll preach about is in this realm of like self-care, self-development, is that you have to be committing to yourself that you're looking for an improvement. Or because some of these things, like you said, 3, 6 months, 9 months, some of these benefits might take a while to be recognized, but you're building up to being able to have those benefits. And so committing to yourself, classic, like Dan Harris always says, the month challenge, I kind of hop on that. If you're going to commit to yourself a minute, 30 seconds a day, do it for a month, and then come back to me and tell me I'm an idiot, that doesn't work. But I will bet that you're not going to do that. I bet that you come back and some sort of experience that you've had throughout that will be a positive benefit. And hopefully that'll be, you've built it around your schedule, and that minute has been not too intrusive to where you'll continue to do it. So that's definitely two of the biggest things that I always encourage people to do. You don't need to be doing the 10 minutes. I have a theory that you'll end up there because you'll just want to kind of increase it. But yeah, just commit to the lowest minimum and do it for a month, and commit to yourself that you're going to commit to that month, so that some of these benefits that maybe need to take a little bit of time to come out, you can at least have a glimpse of those.
Yeah, no, I like that strategy a lot. And I think that, like, one thing I would say, just in terms of people wanting a reason or a benefit to committing to this is, and this is the one that's really stuck for me, is that I know you're in the same phase of life where there's a lot of exciting things happening. We're working our tails off just trying to create the life that we have this amazing picture of. And the practice of meditation, one of the things it really helps me with is bringing it back to the present moment and enjoying this stage of the process. Because you talk to anybody who has achieved massive levels of success, and they look back fondly on the days of when they were building their empire. They were just getting started. They were just really, hustling in the early days, and they always think back of how much they cherish that time. And I think that having this practice helps me, at least, be very mindful of where I'm at now and enjoying this stage, and not just burning out and, going 100 miles per hour all day long, hitting the pillow, waking up and doing the same thing for a year straight, and waking up and be like, whoa, what just happened? It allows me just to enjoy the entire process and step back and enjoy the subtleties, and recognize too when I am feeling a lot of internal pressure, stress, and gives me that self-awareness that I need to lay off a little bit and go, work out, or go on a walk, or go do something for myself, go see a movie or something, just to unplug for a bit. So that's one of the benefits, most tangible benefits that I've personally seen in my own journey, has been that self-awareness.
Yeah, and I think, it definitely reminds me of something, kind of a recent insight I had with one of the guests that I was interviewing. This will actually drop this Monday, whatever the date is, the 22nd, that it'll drop. But it was kind of a realization that, like, there is no destination, right? We're not ever going to be like, oh, I'm done, And so the context around this conversation was about the pursuit of happiness. And so the recognition that I had was, in my self-care, self-development journey, I'm actually becoming happier. And as I'm trying to reach this goal of like, whatever, I don't know, like omnipotent happiness or like consistent happiness or whatever, I'm inching my way towards that and putting different things in my life, to be able to then, just incrementally be happier. And it's never about this like 100% happiness or this like, utopian dream about like where I could be. It's all about the journey. That's all it ever has been about, is just about the journey and how each piece that you're getting and each little nugget of wisdom or each little different self-development practice that you're putting into place is inching you towards that. And so like you're saying, being able to like recognize that and almost just like be enveloped in the present moment to recognize that and also to experience it to its fullest is like hugely powerful, because if we're reaching at some goal, like we think that it's a mountain of life, like no, the mountain never ends. There is no peak. We're never gonna, and even if it is, we still got to go back down the other side of it, And so that was kind of one of the biggest realizations that I had just about, the journey of life, or even any sort of goals that we set, are really just another step towards the right direction of what we're, eventually going to be, feeling better about ourselves. So to be able to like, recognize those moments and really share in the beauty of each one of those incremental moments leading up to, what we'll classify as a wonderful life is hugely powerful.
Yeah, man, because really all we have, all of the human experience is the present moment. I mean, the future is just a projection of what can happen, and the past is just our present moment's thought process of something that happened at a different point in time. And so if you can really master the ability to enjoy the present moment or to recognize the present moment, I'll bring it back to Eckhart Tolle. I forget if it was The Power of Now or New Earth that he mentioned this, but he talks a lot. His whole concept is focusing on the present moment and really living in that. But if you can approach everything in either the mindful space of acceptance, enthusiasm, or enjoyment, those are the three modalities that if you can do everything you do, if you can either, even if it's something negative, that's where that space of acceptance comes into play. But if you can be in one of those mindsets with everything you do, you're going to live a pretty damn happy life, because you're going to recognize, well, all I have is right now. Let me do the best I can right now. And that will ultimately, over time, consistently taking that approach, just lead to a pretty cool life.
Yeah. And I think it's a good point that you make there too, because I think, I don't really like or subscribe to the toxic positivity mindset. I think affirmations are good in a certain sense, but I think there's a sense that we have to understand the reality of our situation and the reality of life, for whatever religious, spiritual, whatever you think about, why we're here, whatever you subscribe to, is that it's not all great. And so like you're saying, the acceptance, of just that's the reality of life. And for me, that presents itself as like a really beautiful thing, that it's so imperfect, but that's kind of what makes it perfect, and like, so to be able to have that, I think some people maybe try to like always put a positive spin on it. And I think long term, really, that's detrimental to our mental health, really, because if you're trying to always find the positive spin on it, sometimes it's a dead end and you can't actually find that. And rather than just accepting that there isn't something positive about that, and that in and of itself is what, and maybe not makes it positive, but kind of makes it a part of this whole thing of life, is helps us to provide some clarity about the ups and downs that are inevitably going to happen in life, instead of just trying to like spin everything to like the positive side of it, just accepting the reality of life. For me personally, I'm going to talk about a personal experience, but for me personally, that has helped me to find that sort of, and joy is not even the right word, just find the the wholeness of the present moment. It doesn't always have to be butterflies and flowers, and like it's not always going to be awesome, and it's not always going to be something that we want to do or we won't find ourselves in situations that we always wanted to be in, but that's life. And so to be able to accept the ups and downs of life, I think is really critical to our long-term happiness or joy, or, you know, whatever we want to call it.
Yeah. And for me, I think that's such a great point, because, you know, anybody who's lived life for 5 seconds knows that shitty things happen. But one perspective on that has helped me a lot is recognizing that when those negative experiences in life, or perceived negative experiences in life, are happening, that there's this overused quote that life is happening for you, not to you, if you can adapt that mindset. But I do agree to it to a very high degree, especially when you can see those challenging moments or those challenging experiences as one of life's many teachers. Just to not sound too woo-woo, but if you can look at, and I'll use a personal example, there were some things, some disagreements within my family and extended family ongoing. And what I've learned to do is recognize that there's going to be people who don't share my opinion on certain topics. And when those situations come to the forefront, it can create incredibly awkward or unpleasant experiences, but realizing, okay, this is an opportunity for me to work on myself and work on how I react. And I'm not going to come out of this, with, it's not going to be all roses and dandelions, but this could be an opportunity for me to grow if I can work on mastering my response to this situation, and I can walk away from it feeling proud with how I reacted, at least, then that's a big win. And just getting to that point has been a huge change for me, other than when in the past I would have walked out of certain frustrating situations and been like, and just dwelled on it for a week and just been like, oh man, just gritting my teeth. I can't believe they said that, or something like that. So just one of the takeaways that I've had in the last 6 months that's changed my perspective on challenging situations.
Yeah, I think it's funny too, it sounds like the realization that you came to is like, in situations like that, we try to change other people, and that we have no control over that. I think about the mastermind event, the Launchpad event that we had, and one of the speakers, I'm forgetting his name now, but he talked about the equation E plus R equals O. Event plus reaction equals outcome. There's only one variable in there that we have control over, and that's the R, the reaction, and so just to understand that that's our internal, however we internally react, that's influencing the outcome. Huge realization. We can't, and maybe sometimes we can have control over, we can sway somebody to think about something differently, but we all know how much energy we've expended to people that we can't, and we've sulked over it for the next week, month. There's family members that, we don't even talk to anymore because of like just situations that arose, and you just can't get over something like that. And so, yeah, it's definitely a great realization for you to have, and something that I've come to understand is like, it's all about that inner work, and it never was about anybody else. And how I'm going to feel at the end of the day is going to be, I have to lay down with my own thoughts, and no one else has to do that, And so if I can help myself out and change the situation, not only is that set myself up for future, resiliency in these sort of situations, but also I'm just, helping myself out for just leading a better, more, I don't know if calm's the right word, but just a better life and having better, situations and experiences.
Yeah, man. I feel like we could go on this for several hours, and I'm sure we will. But one other question I want to ask you before I let you go here is, if you could go back in time and give your younger self a piece of advice, first, what age Nick would you go to? Maybe paint a little picture of where Nick was at that stage in the game for that younger, lesser wise version of yourself, and what would that advice be?
Yeah. I knew this was coming, and it doesn't make it any easier. Yeah, I just think back to like the, let's call him like 18, 19-year-old Nick, where just the misconception of what an identity needed to be. And to an identity, for me at least, it meant to conforming to what other people wanted me to be. And that really didn't serve me well, and got me in trouble in situations of, just random college stuff, or just like, mischief here and there. And didn't really, it's not something that was really fulfilling. And to understand, just to tell this delinquent of an 18 or 19-year-old Nick, just to really be true to yourself. Because at the end of the day, that's really what gives you the most fulfillment. And that's what I've seen. Like, the more that I'm able to, voice my opinion in situations where I, feel strongly about them, or start to do things that are really interesting to me. I mean, even, meditation and mindfulness is very widely accepted, but even it still gets some eye rolls, and I'm okay with that, and I'm actually inviting the eye rolls. I really want to hear why people have, negative opinions about it, but that's just being true to myself, and being able to speak from a place of authenticity, whereas like before it was just like, what was the latest, like what did other people really want to hear from me? Or what was going to please. I was just a huge people pleaser at that time, for the sake of like popularity. And so I think just, sticking to your identity or sticking to your authentic self, because identity can kind of get lost in like, material stuff. But I think just sticking to your authentic self and refining your authentic self over the years to be able to have, a path forward to a more fulfilling existence later on.
Oh man, that's such good wise words to that young Nick Zolfo. And I think young Brad Mulvey would benefit from those, as well as current Brad Mulvey benefits from those words.
Yeah, I would say those words while I'm like choking him, but I'm like, yeah.
Sometimes that's what it takes.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's the only way he would have taken it. He would have understood.
Yeah. So we were talking before we hit record here. You've got some really cool things in the pipeline coming out for the Catching Z's community and stuff you're working on. Where can people find more about you and stay caught up on all of the fun and exciting things that you're rolling out?
Yeah, so the best place, I'm on Twitter and Facebook right now, and anywhere you get podcasts, Catching Z's, Millennials Guide to Mindfulness. The one plug that I will say here in regards to the podcast is I've done a new series that I've gotten a lot of great fulfillment out of, called Meditators Among Us. And what it's really trying to do is humanizing, understanding anybody's practice, from people who just started out to people who have been doing it for decades, and everybody in between, and every sort of type of practice or anything along those lines. And so the plug that I'll give is, if anybody's listening to this, please do reach out to me. I'll also put, I'll send Brad my email address, but any of those places, if you want to reach out to me, please do. And I would love to just hear from everybody that's willing to come on and just really profile your experience into meditation. And even if you're thinking about getting into meditation, I want to hear about that stuff too, to really bring it together and to be able to shed some light on everybody's experience, because they're all unique. We're all, coming at these practices from different walks of life. And so I really want to shed some light on all those different experiences. So please do reach out to me. If you want to come on, I'm happy to chat. And I've had some wonderful conversations. There's about 3 or 4 of those that are up right now on the podcast. So it'll just have, the start of it. It'll start off with Meditators Among Us, and you can hear from those people and just really awesome, authentic, genuine conversations coming out of that.
Oh man, that's a really cool concept, and just digging into real life examples, because so often we just we hear from the experts and, the people who have been mastering this for years, but those authentic, just real world conversations are so powerful too, just to see what's worked for other folks and who may be in our same shoes. So very cool, Nick. Well, I appreciate you coming on today. This has been a lot of fun. And as always, I enjoy these conversations, and I'm sure there's many more ahead.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Brad. Appreciate it.